Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Pongified Cedh. We are in the wake of a huge announcement from the Rules Committee. Dockside Extortionist, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Nadu Winged Wisdom have all been banned in Commander. While this affects everybody who plays Commander in one way or another, the Cedh meta is especially impacted. There have been valid criticisms, concerns. There's also unfortunately been a very toxic reaction by some members of the community. We don't want to talk about our opinions today. We want to show you how we have adapted our lists and made new lists based off these bans and show you some gameplay today. Once some time has passed and if there's interest from our followers, I would really like to have a video where myself and the other 3-3 apes discuss the bans, what the new meta will look like, what cards become obsolete, what cards get better in this new meta, and what kind of new decks we might see emerge. If you're a fan of what we're doing here, the best way you can support us is to subscribe to the channel, to share it with your friends and other Magic players. You can also support us as well as our sponsor, Le Coin du Jeu, by using the code Pongified10 when you buy from their online orders, applicable for a very long time, but only in Canada. This code will get you 10% off your online order and will also get you one of our custom tokens in the package. These tokens are designed by Gabrielle Morisseau specifically for our channel. She has a lot of amazing artwork. I encourage you to check out her Instagram in the description of this video. And please note that foil versions of these tokens are also available on our Etsy store, also linked in the description. A big thank you to all of you who have been following us since day one, and thank you to all new viewers as well. We are trying as hard as we can to make more and more high quality videos. We do this on the side while we're all working full-time jobs, but we hope you are enjoying this. We want to keep doing this as much as we can, and your support means a lot to us. Without further ado, let's get into the decks that we'll be playing today. First, we have Max playing Tayam. Tayam is not very affected by this ban, and since almost every other deck in the meta is, that means that Tayam is coming out ahead. Tayam already, in my personal opinion, I feel to be one of the best stacks decks, really being able to break the parity on rule of law effects and play things like Collector Oof that are super impactful. Furthermore, with three of the most powerful accelerants in the format being gone now, we can anticipate slower games, which just gives more time for Tayam to build his board, accumulate value, and become an inevitability. Max is keeping a hand with Cryptolith Rite, Worldly Tutor, Godless Shrine, Misty Rainforest, Windswept Heath, Bloom Tender, and he London Mulliganed an Arid Mesa. Next, we have Ben playing his classic deck, Kinnan. Now, Kinnan's another one that we can speculate comes out ahead here. It only lost Mana Crypt and I guess a few clones because they really like to clone Dockside, but that just means it gets more room for its own engines and its own big beaters that it can flip off the top. Ben's keeping a hand with a Void Winnower, Fabricate, Felwar Stone, Polywog Prodigy, Birds of Paradise, Midamo, and Mox Diamond. Next, we have Phil playing Tivit. This is a bit of a mixed bag here. So it lost Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt, makes it much harder to get Tivit out, but I don't think Tivit players are really trying to rush it out anyways. I think this benefits quite a bit because one of the biggest criticisms was that Tivit feeds Dockside by making so many artifacts at once. Now it doesn't have to worry about that. It can sort of bide its time, it can control the board, put Tivit out at a strategic time, and then get its combo together, or not play Tivit at all because Esper Shells are just powerful enough with the colors that they have already. Phil is keeping a hand with City of Brass, Lotus Petal, Chrome Mox, Mana Drain, Dothy Voidwalker, Tainted Pact, and Esper Sentinel. And lastly, we have Jerome playing Maria. This is Jerome's pet deck. It's hard to say if this gets better or worse with the ban. I'm going to guess worse, it loses Dockside, but this isn't really a meta deck, this is a fringe deck, so I'm not really sure how this performed beforehand anyways. He likes to call it Bad Urza for reference. He's keeping a hand with Noxious Revival, Sylvan Library, Staff of Domination, Stomping Ground, Lotus Petal, Exotic Orchard, and he's London Mulligan and Elvish Mystic. Max starts us off by playing a Misty Rainforest and passing turn. Ben draws, plays a Mox Diamond, drops his Minamo, plays a Command Tower, and then pays 2 for a Polywog Prodigy. Phil draws, plays a City of Brass, casts a Lotus Petal, triggering Polywog Prodigy. In response, Max cracks his fetch and casts a Worldly Tutor. He puts Orcish Bowmaster on top of his library. Phil casts an Esper Sentinel and passes the turn. Jerome plays a Stomping Ground standing up, casts a Lotus Petal, triggering the Esper Sentinel and the Poliwag. He does not pay for the Esper. And he casts a Sylvan Library. The Bowmaster shakes in excitement on top of Max's library. Jerome passes turn. Max draws a mystery card, plays a Woodswept Heath, cracks it for Savannah, and passes. Ben casts Kinnan and triggers the Evolve of the Poliwag Prodigy once Kinnan resolves. In response, Jerome plays a Noxious Revival, hoping to dodge that Poliwag Prodigy trigger. This triggers Esper Sentinel, however, and Max responds to the trigger by flashing in the Orcish Bowmaster. He sends the ETB at Kinnan, and then the draw from the Esper triggers it to kill Kinnan. Poliwag does still get its counter. Ben passes to Phil. Phil casts a Mystic Remora, making sure that Orcish Bowmaster has control over the entire game. The Fish cast triggers the Frog, and then the Orc kills the Robot. Phil passes to Jerome. He untaps and looks at 3 cards with Sylvan Library. Max is going to send all the triggers towards the Poliwag Prodigy. Jerome's going to keep all the cards in his hand. He'll cast his Lotus Petal, triggering the Frog, triggering the Bowmaster, killing the Frog, and he'll use that 3 mana to cast his commander, Maria, and then pass the turn. Max will untap for his 3rd turn, draw, play a Godless Shrine, and cast a Bloom Tender. He'll then go to combat and swing his big beefy Orc army at Jerome, who's leveraging his life total. He won't block and take 7. In his second main phase, Max casts Llanowar Elves and then passes the turn. Ben plays an Otawara, casts a Fellwar Stone, triggering Remora. That draw triggers Orcish Bowmaster. Max pings Phil. Next, Ben will cast a Copy Artifact. It'll trigger Remora again. Phil will get pinged again by the Bowmaster. And Ben will have the Copy Artifact enter as a copy of Fellwar Stone and pass turn. Phil will untap, kill the fish on its first birthday, draw for turn, play a Watery Grave standing up, and then for 3 mana, cracking his Lotus Petal, and then a whopping 10 life, cast a Toxic Deluge. This resolves and wipes the entire board. This is Tyam's biggest weakness. He'll then pass the turn to Jerome. He'll untap, draw, look at 3 cards with his Sylvan Library. He'll keep one of the extra cards, so he'll pay 4 life, play an Exotic Orchard, and cast a Staff of Domination, passing back to Max, who will tap out for a Birds of Paradise and a Cryptolith Right. Ben will untap, cast Kinnan for 4, cast a Birds of Paradise, and pass. Phil will draw for turn, play a Spire of Industry, cast a Graph Digger's Cage, Kinnan's weakness. Ben will, of course, counter that with a Force of Negation, pitches his Gilded Drake to that, and then Phil follows up with a Mana Drain on the Force of Negation. Ben, however, has the Pact of Negation, so after this complicated stack, Graph Digger's Cage is not only countered, but exiled. Jerome untaps, draws 3 cards, takes a look at them, decides to keep all 3, paying 8 life, going down to 9. He plays a Shifting Woodland, comes in untapped, he will cast a Mana Vault, and he will pay to have Maria come in, cast a Mox Opal, follow that up with a Goblin Engineer, and put a Pilipala into his graveyard, passing back to Max. Max will untap, draw, and then cast Tyam for 4 mana. On Ben's upkeep, he has to pay for the Pact of Negation. He draws, and then he swiftly casts a Transmute Artifact. The spell resolves, which means that he can sack his Fellwar Stone to get Basalt Monolith into play. He pays the 1 mana to make sure it sticks around. If you don't know, Kinnan makes this produce 4 mana. It costs 3 to untap it. That means he gets infinite colorless mana. Nobody has the interaction to stop this right now. So he does exactly that. He creates 100 million colorless mana. He casts a Void Winnower. He taps his Birds of Paradise for 2 green. He casts an Invasion of Ikoria, X equals 2. He's going to find himself a Thrasios from his deck, put it into play. And then he's going to activate Thrasios until he gets Mirage Mirror in hand. He's going to present a loop where he alternates the target of Mirage Mirror between Basalt and Command Tower so that he can constantly untap it and then tap it for colored mana when it turns back into the Command Tower. Now Command Tower will allow him to have infinite colored mana. This means that with the infinite blue and green, he can activate Kinnan until he has every creature or every non-human creature in his deck onto the battlefield, then activate Thrasios until he has Finale of Devastation, pump infinite mana into that, and then he has a bunch of 1 million creatures that will have trample and haste and can swing at everything. Congrats to Ben on the very efficient win. It's clear to me that Kinnan persists through all of these bans. It's still going to be a staple in the meta. Time for game 2. Ben is going to go first this time. He is keeping a hand with Invasion of Ikoria, City of Brass, Breeding Pool, Arcane Signet, Court of Calling, and his London mulligans are Trophy Mage and Manglehorn. Phil is keeping a hand with the One Ring, Grafdigger's Cage, Cavern of Souls, Demonic Consultation, Mystic Remora, Watery Grave, and Polywog Prodigy. Jay, Multi 4 sadly, he's keeping a Vexing Bauble, Mox Opal, Welding Jar, Bloodstained Mire, and as London mulled a Veil of Summer, Shifting Woodland, and Wooded Foothills. And finally, we have Max keeping a hand with Orcish, Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Scute Swarm, Ancient Tomb, Manifold, Flooded Strand, and Savannah. Ben will start us off with a very humble tapped Breeding Pool pass. Phil will play Otawara as a land and cast a Mystic Remora. Ben has a response. He pays 2 life for a mental misstep. Phil cries, the rest of the table rejoices, and he passes. Jerome will crack his Bloodstained Mire for a Taiga, then cast a Welding Jar, a Mox Opal, and tap his Taiga for a Vexing Bauble. Imagine that fish was out. He will pass the turn with 1 card in hand. Max will draw, he'll play a Savannah, and he'll use it to cast a Manifold and pass it back to Ben, who plays a City of Brass and casts an Arcane Signet, and he will pass over to Phil, who draws, plays a Cavern of Souls. He'll name Rogue and cast a Polywog Prodigy, passing over to Jerome, who will untap, look a little bit disappointed, and then pass over to Max. Max untaps, plays an Ancient Tomb, and then taps his lands to cast a Scute Swarm and sends it back over to Ben. Ben draws, plays a flip land, casts Kinnan for 2, and then for 3, casts an Invasion of Ikoria with X equal to 1. He gives that over to Jerome to defend it, and he's going to put a Delighted Halfling into play. Phil plays a Watery Grave standing up. He casts an Imperial Seal. He finds a mystery card to put on top of his library, and then he's going to pass over to Jerome. Jerome will cast a Sylvan Library and then pass back to Max. Max will untap, he'll cast a Bristly Bill, and then he'll put a Flooded Strand into play. This will trigger his Scute Swarm, making him an insect token. Bristly Bill will also put a counter on the Scute Swarm. He'll go to combat, swing at Ben with the Scute Swarm, and pass over. Ben untaps, draws, and plays a Springleaf Drum. Phil will untap, draw, and then cast a Grafdigger's Cage. Kinnan and Tyam panic. Kinnan activates Kinnan in response and flips into a Hullbreaker Horror. Very scary. Phil will crack his fetch. Max will crack his fetch in response, get his Bristly Bill and Scute Swarm triggers. Phil will get his Scrubland into play, cast a Thassa's Oracle, to which nobody has a response, and then promptly cast his Demonic Consultation in response to the ETB, naming Mana Crypt, which of course is not in the deck, meaning that he will win with the empty deck. Congrats to Phil for that win. Very well done. So it seems that despite the bans, CEDH is still a very fast and interactive format. Everybody still has enough mana to do their thing and to stop other people from doing their things. While it seems like there is less diversity when you get rid of cards like Dockside and there are whole decks built around Dockside, it does also give opportunities for other decks to kind of come out of the shadows and catch up and find ways that they can contribute to this new space. So I'm excited to see how this is going to develop and emerge. I'm very curious to hear all of your opinions. Please leave them in the comments. And once again, thank you for watching, and thank you to Le Coin du Jeu, our sponsor. Remember to use the code Pongified10 to get 10% off your online orders and also get one of our custom tokens in the package. Thanks everyone, and take care.